Welcome to Deepen with Pastor Joby Martin. The Church of 1122 is a movement for all people to discover and deepen a relationship with Jesus Christ. And we're praying this message helps you deepen your relationship with Him. Now let's dive in.
All right, welcome to week 5 of our Be Free series with the Deepen podcast. I'm going to start with this question, Pastor Joby. It's Beach Baptism Week.
Let's go.
And one of our favorite weeks at 1122. So talk about what was behind what we call big momentum events, as we have 4 of them every year, and just share for anybody who doesn't know what those are and why we do them.
Well, there's a couple of things working there. Part of it is my youth ministry background. So we had a big event, fall, winter, spring, summer. I always felt like we were getting ready for it or coming off the momentum of it. Thought that was a good idea. I was in a meeting one time with Pastor Rick Warren, who God continues to use to do amazing things. And he said, you can't create momentum. And I thought, I think you can. I think, look at Valentine's Day. That's not, somebody
Hallmark figured it out.
Made that up, and we all bought into it, and we have to do something about it. So, the church calendar, not like the official liturgical calendar, but we got Christmas and Easter given to us, by modern Christian history. And so, but there was never really anything in the summer or in the fall, right? And so I thought, what if we just established some family rhythms as a church family that we could all schedule around and get ready for, like almost like a family vacation or, family traditions kind of thing. Yeah. And so people are already coming back to church as school gets back. And I thought, how do we put a faith stake in that and make something out of it? So that's where Saturated came from. And then what if after Easter we had an event, Beach Baptism is what it became, where we could celebrate all that God's been doing by celebrating baptisms. And so first weekend of January every year, I stand in front of the church and give out a vision piece, and the big 4 momentum events are there, and I encourage our church to schedule their whole life around it and be a part of these family traditions that our church is a part of.
Yeah, you have a phrase that you say, in every family, rhythms rule.
Yeah. And families that don't have healthy rhythms, it don't go good.
Yeah.
They don't have a Christmas plan. They don't have a summer vacation plan, right? They just react. No bueno.
Yeah. Well, it's a really exciting time, and praise God for all He's doing.
Dude, it's epic. I mean, every year when we get finished, I usually just stay in the water till last and just watch all of the people celebrating and hugging. And I mean, you know how many people, miraculous one-mores are getting baptized? The groups of people have been praying for this person forever. And it's so cool. One of my favorite things is when we dunk somebody is you see a little explosion of celebration on the shore. And man, that's their family, their disciple group. That's some people that care about this person a lot. It's really great.
Yeah. I think you're talking to some people tonight who are going to get baptized.
Yeah, we have people coming in from all over.
Yeah.
I mean, lots of people from out of state that worship with us online that are coming here to get baptized. We had a guy get saved tonight, and he's going to get baptized Sunday.
It's awesome.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, we're going to jump into the sermon, and this is about confrontation and accountability and calling people out. And let's start with this question. Why is it there's this word privatization? And so one of the things that's, I guess you could argue that there's not as much of it now because of the internet and social media, but there is this, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there is this thing in the air in our society that's sort of like your business is your business, and there's just certain invisible lines that, you probably sense it usually with people at the gym or something like that. You wouldn't there's certain things you don't ask about, right? And so what has led to that makes us uncomfortable with confronting about hard issues, even in the church? I mean, there's this tiptoeing around certain things.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shadow of some of the wonderful things in our culture. Individual freedoms are a wonderful thing, but a shadow of it is that this whatever you do is none of my business. There's also a shadow. There's this myth of the separation of church and state, which was not in the Declaration of Independence like people think. It was a one line in a Thomas Jefferson letter. And that was to protect the church from the state, not the other way around. It was not to protect the state from the church. Well, that has been individualized to the point where people think there's just some things you don't talk about. But this idea of you do you, or what I do is just my own private decisions and doesn't affect anybody else, it's just not a biblical idea at all. I mean, the context in which the entire Bible was written, even though it was written over multiple contexts, over multiple years on different continents, life in community is a central reality of what it means to be a biblical Christian. And we have somehow over time Americanized that into your personal Lord and Savior. Now, he is your personal Lord and Savior, and you're not saved by a church, but you're saved to a church, saved to a church family, saved into a faith community, and we're supposed to one another. And a part of that one another is to encourage one another. But that Greek word doesn't mean way to go. It means to spur a horse in the right direction. So we're supposed to love each other enough that we can say, hey man, you're doing some things out of step with the gospel. But what's weird right now, you mentioned online, these two extremes are happening. It's like personally, your business is none of my business. But then publicly, I'm never going to talk to you face to face. I'm just going to post negative things about your ministry, though I've never met you or I don't know you. So both of those things are happening.
Yeah. Or on the other side, let's just say somebody running for office, they don't get a private life, or somebody who falls under scrutiny. It doesn't matter when they said it, where they said it, if it was written down, if it was texted to somebody, it becomes public property almost,
Well, in our culture's pursuit of fame, there's two ways to be famous. Do something awesome or criticize those who've done. That's it. That's kind of the two things. The internet is plagued with the morality police, the heresy hunters, here's what everybody did wrong.
I think Paul is talking in Galatians specifically about a thing happening in the context of a deep relationship.
For sure.
And so it's not just fly-by accountability here, or it's my job. Because this same Paul writes these words, as far as it's up to me, I want to be at peace with all men. And so Paul wasn't looking for a fight with Peter. Paul wasn't looking at Peter, waiting on Peter to mess up, or he wasn't trying to prove that Peter was a hypocrite. He was a brother and a friend, and they had a deep, abiding relationship, and Peter was acting out of character, and Paul accepted that responsibility to step in and have that conversation with a man that he loved. That is very different than I'm going to cast an indictment about a man or a person that I don't know, based on some idea that I have.
And this happened at the church at Antioch where Paul was pastoring. He is protecting his flock. He's not hunting. There's too many people that are hunting. It's very different than so Peter travels from Jerusalem, comes to Antioch. Paul planted the church. Paul at that current time is overseeing the church. He sees something that is affecting his flock. And that's I protect my house with a gun. If you come in my house, I'm going to protect my family. I'm not walking the streets with a gun looking for somebody doing something wrong. There's very different things.
So different, yeah.
Yeah, but confrontation in the way that we read about it in the Bible is very different than opinion validation.
Well, say that again. That's incredible.
So confrontation, as we read about it in the Bible, is different than opinion validation. And the majority of what we would call confrontational in modern popular culture is really just everybody trying to get their opinion validated about somebody else or about a set of ideas, not true biblical confrontation around things that really matter, or that's rooted in it's certainly not a gospel issue in almost any context in modern culture, but this is happening in the relationship in the context of a local church among church leaders that are also friends,
right,
and have deep mutual respect for one another. And so it is not an honoring confrontation. Even on a Imago Dei level, it's not an honoring confrontation if it doesn't first start from a place of respect. And so it's more or less fly-by opinion validation. And so that might fall apart somewhere, but these are very different things.
Yeah, and you see it evidenced in Acts 15, we talked about it last week. Paul and Peter Peter goes first, Paul goes second in the Jerusalem council, and Peter answers theologically, and then Paul answers experientially, and they're both saying they're on the same team together. You also see it when Peter writes a couple of letters, and he references Paul as a scripture writer, as an apostle. He's not like, man, that guy's mean. He's so, like, he called me out one time. No. This is total iron sharpens iron, as one brother or friend sharpens another.
Yeah.
Yeah, your question is, what do you think has led to the privatization in society? And I think it's that we don't respect each other and we don't have trust. And because there's not trust and mutual respect between humans, then we use each other. And when you feel used, you withdraw. And we've just been on decades and decades and decades now of these people with this set of ideas trying to use these people with this set of ideas in order to gain more power and more control. And when people feel used, they just withdraw into themselves and they get really, really private. You know what I'm saying? And that's the world we live in now, where everybody has 8-foot fences in their backyards and nobody knows their neighbors, and the family is no longer a value in society. And this is all the result of people, one group trying to use another group and trying to use another group because they don't respect each other. And because they don't respect each other, they're never going to trust each other. And we can trust each other and disagree on things in an ideal world, right? But that's, we don't live in an ideal world.
I also think it's an overcorrection of probably, I don't throw this phrase around lightly, but spiritual abuse in the past of churches like over disciplining. I mean, think about like the Scarlet Letter, right? Didn't we all read that in like the 8th grade or something?
Yeah.
All right, so here's an entire church system that is going to require this lady who's pregnant out of wedlock to be branded with a adultery sign in the name of the guy that said, "Don't stone her unless you've got no sin." I mean, so. You know what I mean? So then if that is your history, up just 150 years ago, then that thing can swing to like all grace and no truth, right? Yeah. And there can be some of that.
And I can even think of examples of churches that I've been a part of where it feels like, I don't know, it feels icky. Like the closeness of prying into each other's lives, it departs from that spirit of like encouragement and accountability and like, oh no, we deserve to know and be able to tell each other what to do by some kind of unhealthy emotional codependence. I mean, it's just like,
I think
Paul was not prying.
Right.
Yeah. That is like I think that's, I know, I've heard of those churches where like the first thing you do when you get involved is you have to confess all of your sexual sin. Like, whoa. Not here, 1122. That's not what we're doing here. But you should invite that kind of accountability into your life, not be required from the top down. That's very different things.
Yeah.
So ideally, there's a few people in your life, there really are no secrets.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important that you've got at least one person where you can just say the quiet part in your mind out loud.
Yeah.
And that your spouse knows who that person is, and that your spouse also trusts that person a lot. So like Gretchen has just a dear friend who also really loves me a lot. And also her dad grew up in the spotlight, so she has a unique perspective on that. And that's the person, like when I aggravate Gretchen or when I'm out of step with the gospel, not if, when, and the list is long. I know that when it is a healthy thing for Gretchen to say whatever she wants to out loud to this girl who has been I can't describe how close of a friend this girl's been to her for like 14 years now. You know what I mean? And I trust what the friend's going to say. She ain't just going to pile on and be like, I don't know how you do it, married to such a, like, this is the cross you bear. It's not that. She's for us. And honestly, Gretchen knows that Britt, that he's like, I got one elder and I got him that I can just say, here's all the things, man, And it's very helpful. It's very helpful.
It speaks so much to the kind of community we're supposed to live in the gospel. I mean, we all have a mutual friend going through something really tough right now. And I was with a couple of guys talking to him yesterday, and just about how when you go through something really tough, you need friends in your life. And we talked about the corner toters and that kind of thing. And we all kind of sat there and looked at each other and said, I think this is kind of how we're supposed to live all the time.
For sure.
You know what I mean? With this kind of brotherhood and access
Now,
and community.
I will say, you know what? Sometimes if you get a small enough group of people, life is not crisis, you know? So I do want to give a warning to like the drama kings and queens of Christianity, which I think there's a higher percentage of them in church than in normal humanity. And they're always trying to dial everything up to like drama level.
Where's your heart at? Just tell me. I feel so spiritually oppressed by this. You know?
Right. So in the neutral times, you're just like making deposits of relational credit because you love these people. Mm-hmm. And then this brother today, we were in a time together with him, and he just said he said something. It was so, I wish I'd have written it down. It was so poetic, and he was talking about how tears are the evidence of love. Mm. Like when people just sit down with you and you're hurting, and they just cry with you. Mm-hmm. Like seeing the tears of people, you just know they love you. Wow. But you're not trying to turn everything into a Paul versus Peter moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for the weeping with those who weep and mourning with those who mourn to be authentic, there's a whole lot of enjoying each other and getting to know each other in the ordinary.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And for that thing to truly be authentic when the crisis comes.
Right.
And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for all of us, especially in our modern hypersensitized world where, you know, we're chasing emotions and chasing feelings and we're chasing the next dopamine hit in our brain with our phones and all the things, is to just enjoy people and enjoy God in the most mundane and most ordinary facets of life. If you can learn to do that, that's true freedom, man. Yeah. And then when, you know, living in a fractured world or sin or crisis or whatever hits close to home, you have these deep-rooted relationships and deep-rooted connections that were forged almost passively by you just by being involved in each other's lives, but not having to do the deep dive every time to get some sense of feeling.
Because that's exhausting.
It's exhausting, man.
Dude,
just be normal, man.
I get to do a lot of ministry,
in Jesus' name.
I ain't trying to sign up for every person I know to be an object of ministry. I just can't do it. Right. Like I have some people that I could just like cut up with and laugh. That's what, I mean, like I love hanging out with y'all because the large majority of our time together, outside of like decision-making meetings and that, but when we just hang out, it's just fun. It's just fun. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with fun.
Yeah.
Like fun gets you further, faster in regards to building relational equity. Mm. And when you're going through it, you can, when it's time to dig in, you dig in.
No doubt.
Well, we see in this text, both Peter and Barnabas falling prey to negative peer pressure. And so have you ever been in a situation where you looked back on it later and you're just like, dang it, I folded to some peer pressure that I was acting different around some people who came around? Like, does that bring any personal stories up in your mind?
I don't know that I've gotten any better at it. The circumstance of my life is so different. Mm-hmm. Look, man, when you're 50 and you pastor a church, you're just in different circles than when I was 15 trying to fit in. Mm-hmm. But I think, because sometimes I think we take credit as if we've been sanctified in an area, but the circumstances just changed. Mm-hmm. So I'd be careful before I'm like, I don't care what people think. Because I think that. Mm-hmm. I'm just not trying to get a promotion at a job right now.
Right.
You know, that's just not in my world, you know? So I think I could be just as susceptible to it if I'm not careful. Which, by the way, is why he who walks with the wise grows wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. So, like, man, I just talked to this brother that just got saved tonight. I mean, it was awesome. And I'm like, step 2, baptized. Step 3, surround yourself with who you want to be. And that's who you're going to be.
Yeah. I think everybody's guilty of it to some extent. It's like you talked a lot about it's easy to see in other people sometimes their problems than it is to see in yourself, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. But this thing is also easier to see in others. So just like you can observe other people acting different when a certain person comes in the room, and it becomes obvious to you, but probably not to them because they're just too busy freaking out.
I can feel it. I've told you before. Well, I mean, I talked about Dr. Piper for weeks leading up to it. Then we all got to hang with him.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've not ever seen that many grown men fanboy out that fast when Dr. Piper came.
Me too. So
awesome.
I got to control it. So sometimes, I don't know how you control your feelings, I mean, I did. I felt like Buddy the Elf when he saw Santa. I was like, oh, well, But little things, like I've shared this before. When I'm going to be at a table with a bunch of people, and I know there's this thing in me that wants to sit in a certain spot, I just go to the bathroom while everybody's choosing their seat. And whichever one's chosen for me, that's where I sit. And that sounds so silly, but that if you just do that, it's just a guardrail to try to guard against it.
It's a great hack.
And that's what it is. But, hacks sometimes can be like training wheels to just wear that out of you. I get to disciple some really famous people. And for their sake, I'm not going to say their name right now. And I just make sure I do the same thing with them of anybody else that I've discipled one-on-one. I don't dodge anything because this person is who they are,
Yeah.
So I think you always talk about how there's, like, where there's smoke, there's fire. I can feel it in me when I feel like I want to act a little differently because of this certain person,
Yeah.
And so it's a real check for me to go, ooh, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? The other thing, too, by the way, is if I'm around somebody and I can, and I'm the person maybe stirring that kind of feeling in them, man, I just try to, like, ground that situation as fast as possible, Like, just something self-deprecating or just, because that's because you can be an instigator of that in somebody else's life and kind of like it. Like, kind of like everybody puckers up when I walk in the room, or this person is really excited to see me and I'm going to milk it. I mean, that ain't good.
Yeah. And you reminded us about what it means to be a person of integrity. It means whole, one. You don't get separate versions of your life. So it really is an illusion. Like, there aren't different parts of you. It's just you being different, being hypocritical. And so I recognize that myself too, and I hope I grow in that, continue to. So Paul says he was out of step with the truth of the gospel. So how was hypocrisy in this case an issue of gospel?
I think there's 4 things. We talked about 4 places where he was out of step. He mentions them. Fear is out of step with the gospel. Hypocrisy is out of step with the gospel. The way hypocrisy is out of step with the gospel is, so it literally means to speak behind a mask or to wear another face in Greek. And so, the way I've said it is the real Jesus died on a real cross for the real you. So why are you faking this? So for you to fake it, to try to win the approval of man, is because you don't believe you have the approval of God through the gospel. That's why it's out of step. I think pride was out of step with the gospel because you think you're better than somebody else. The moment you think that, so he thought that racially and religiously that the Jews were better than the Gentiles. That is just completely out of step with the gospel.
He was at least acting that way in this circumstance. Do we know what the timeline of this event versus the Acts 15 council?
Highly debated.
Okay.
Highly debated. It's kind of 50-50. Ty probably goes way more towards this happened. Wait, let me think about it. This happened first and then the Acts 15 council. But then you got, like, MacArthur thinks it was Acts 15 that led, and then this happens.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but all of it's within 3 years.
Okay, yeah.
And it gets way into like the date of Galatians being written. And so some people want it to be 47 and some people want it to be 51.
Yeah. Your question was, how is this hypocrisy a gospel issue? My immediate answer is, isn't it all? Isn't all hypocrisy a gospel issue? So that's my first question back to you.
Is all hypocrisy a gospel issue? Yes.
Okay. All right, great. I'm glad we agree. I don't know this to be true. There's two things that I think about, because I really try to put these guys like, these are just humans. They're humans. They're very smart humans. They're very called humans. They're very anointed humans, but they're human beings. And I think part of the issue with Peter, some of Peter's motivation, I would dare to say, was self-preservation. That he spent more time with this group than he did with that group.
Yeah.
And it was going to make his life far more difficult. And so he just went into a little bit of a self-preservation mode.
Right.
Right? It's like...
Which that's where it gets real. Like the stuff we talked about just a minute ago, like, do you ever act different around people? Like, just wait till it's actually your boss or your promotions depending on it. That's when it really gets real.
Right.
Stuff like that.
There's the self-preservation, but then I think there's you see this play out in management relationships. You see this play out in friendships sometimes. The who matters. And so not everybody feels equally threatened by everybody that has every kind of position of authority. It's not all equal. Who it is matters. And I think it's very specific that it's James. One, I think James was probably, if you read the book of James, he seemed to be a relatively intense human in general. Okay? Which I can relate to that. I'm down. Not a knock on James. But when you talk about the three people that were closest to Jesus, Peter, James, and John. And so I think that there's this like peer-to-peer, interpersonal, weird, I'm guessing here, but I could go as far as to speculate. There's some kind of weird interpersonal tension there based on proximity to Jesus that Peter got jacked up in his head over in regards to who James was, in regards to his proximity to Jesus, you know? And I don't know that this to be true. I'm totally reading between the lines. It's a little theological or at least historical speculation on my part. But I do think that the relationship between Peter and James had something to do with Peter's reaction when James came to town. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I'm not saying I'm right.
No, I definitely think, I think the people that said they came in the name of James, the brother of Jesus, I think they're hijacking James's message.
That's what I'm saying.
See James in Acts 15.
Their proximity to James
right
is layered in there with Peter.
What you said at first, I think, is Peter pastors the first church of Jerusalem. And these people from Jerusalem are showing up. And so he's going to culturally do what the people that he's got to go home and pastor are into, even though they're wrong. Later, Paul's going to be like, dude, if these guys got to get circumcised and you can't eat bacon and rat fillets with them, you nullify the power of the gospel.
Yeah, I just am curious if the upline was someone other than James.
Oh, you're so right. There's just certain people that for whatever reason have a different level of power over you than other people.
It's the strangest thing.
We've talked about it. Even like leading or managing people. There's some people I'm just say what I want and love them and they just, and then there's other people I feel like I feel weird leading them. I don't know what the deal is. We've talked about it.
It is strange. So I think there's some of that going on in regards to the historical relationship between those guys, but I don't know.
You were talking about bacon wrap fillets, and I thought of this meme I saw that said, "Well done is just for good and faithful servants, not steaks."
If we had a sign, we would put that on there.
Yeah. So how is this different? So Paul writes in 1 Corinthians, "I become all things to all people," and he's talking about food sacrificed to idols. And I'm not going to offend the conscience of my weaker brother. So how is this situation with Peter changing his behavior? Could he have argued, we're speculating, could he have argued, well, I'm just trying not to offend these Jewish leaders that came from Jerusalem?
No.
What's different?
Because they were out of step with the gospel, and Peter is not the weaker one. Like, Peter's not weak. Peter's a mature Christian, and he's acting out of step there. I would imagine if that was his play, then he would say to Paul, this is an evangelism strategy for these unsaved Jewish church attending people.
Yeah.
But apparently that's not, because it says for fear. I mean, you got to, like, I think it's okay to have a spirit-filled imagination to bring to life the events. Just that is always subservient to the words in the Bible. And the words are for fear of the circumcision party. So we know that according to the Bible, Peter's motivation is not that he may win some. The motivation is fear.
Yeah, and you talked about this last week that these are believers, like, because it says believers who are part of the circumcision party or are part of the Pharisees. So they're believers, but they have this mistaken belief, So it could be that these are actually believers who came, to your point, that he's not trying to evangelize them. He's trying to actually impress them.
We may have to edit this part out. Forgive me in my ignorance. Do we know where the funding was coming from? Because by this point in time, they had moved from we're sharing all things in common to we're laying it at the apostles' feet.
No, Jerusalem was broke. They were starving to death. That's what the offering in Corinthians is about. It's really for nobody was getting persecuted as hard as those believers in Jerusalem. Because when they started moving out to like Paul's missionary journey, the pagans, they believed in a million gods anyway. So add one more, we don't care. I mean, we got temple prostitutes and, we got a statue to an unknown god. So you can add as many as you want. The Jesus thing, that's fine. We think you're weird because you'll only sleep with your wife and, you'll care for sick people. But the believers in Jerusalem are getting worn out. I mean, the Pharisees and Sadducees and the Sanhedrin that killed Jesus, remember, Paul is trying to wipe them out, Saul of Tarsus. So it was actually like a reverse funding thing. Like the mothership is now being taken care of. This is why Paul's writing letters and going to people, and he's like, hey, Corinthians, I'm going to send Titus and get that offering together so we can take care of the believers back in Jerusalem.
Well, we don't have to edit it out then. It's not as stupid a question as it sounded like it was in my head. So
anytime you say we may have to edit this out, it definitely,
in my
we're definitely
mind,
not
it
going
sounded
to.
like a really dumb question because it's like you should know the answer to this, but I couldn't think of it.
No, because I get what you're getting at. There'll be a lot of times in our current life, and you're like, hey, man, you can stand up for what you believe in all you want to, but you cannot, like, bite the hand that's feeding you. I mean, that's a driver. That's a fear-based driver more than anything else, as much as anything else.
Yeah. That's kind of like we were saying before. It's when it'll really test whether you're willing to stand up if it's going to cost you, really going to cost you something. So you talked a little bit, Pastor Joby, about judging, which is in that text in Matthew. So how is this accountability different from judging? What's the difference for people to understand?
Well, Jesus is talking about an attitude of the heart. So judge not lest you be judged. And then he talks about how to judge. So we know he's not talking about that we don't judge, but we're not supposed to have a hypercritical, I'm better than you, let me hit you with a hammer. I think the reason he does the whole eye thing, I talked about it tonight, if you were like, hey bro, I got something in my eye, will you help me with my eye? And I was like, yeah, let me get my tool. And I got a power saw. He'd be like, I don't think you're my guy. So how would you remove a speck of sawdust? It would be it'd be a little water maybe. You don't want the action of removing the sawdust to create more damage than the sawdust. Then in Corinthians, Paul says, he asks a kind of a rhetorical question that means, yes, we are supposed to judge our brothers and sisters. But again, not from a critical way. And in fact, in Galatians 6:1, is that what it is? In Galatians 6, he is going to talk about how to restore. Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. So, well, that's judgy. If I'm like, I've got to make a judgment if for me to determine that you have been, or y'all have to make a judgment to determine that I have been caught in a transgression. And then now how you do that and who you take action with is determined by if they believe Jesus. If they don't believe in Jesus, you're not having a restoration conversation. You're having an evangelism conversation. But if they are a brother or sister in Christ, then it's a restoration conversation. That's the difference.
We live in a time where language is so polarizing, and it's becoming more and more so. So words can set people off so easily. I think of the word discrimination, right? Like that'll set people off. If you say, "Oh, yeah, that's discrimination." Well, discrimination just means to choose, right? We're discriminating all the time. We're making a choice, this choice over that choice. So I think maybe that gets at a little bit what you're saying with judging. Judging just means, I have to make a decision.
Well, a little bit of the history of the word. When we hear that negative, we mean it came from racial discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
That I was prejudging somebody based simply on a race.
Mm-hmm.
No bueno.
Right.
Discriminating on who babysits my children, not based on race, but based on character, is a very important thing.
Right.
Yeah, we're all very comfortable with our preferred version of being judgmental because it's just our normal.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a real difference in, I guess the fundamental question that I keep wrestling with in my mind in regards to this is my pointing this thing out, bringing it up, making conversation with you about whatever it is it for your good that I'm doing this? Or is it to see you conform to my set of preferences? And those are just different things, because if it's for your good, then it's hopefully rooted in the gospel and in, you having a healthier relationship with the Lord and not just you conforming to my set of preferences. And some of us carry a judgmental eye and a judgmental posture so close to the chest, and it's so wired into who we are that our just general posture toward the world is displeasure and disappointment. And then everything's passing through that all the time. But the motivation in it is not for your good, according to the gospel. The motivation in it is there's these very arbitrary standards that no one lives up to, including myself, but I'm going to hold us all to it, but mostly be frustrated at you.
Mm-hmm.
And man, that's just a hard way to live.
So I like the way you define that. Okay, so if the filter by which you say, should I say this, is this for your good?
Mm-hmm.
Well, back to what Paul says in Corinthians, what Jesus is talking about in Matthew 7, what he's talking about in Matthew 18. Well, the first question to ask is this person lost or is this person a believer?
Mm-hmm.
Because what good is it if I can get you to conform to some standard of morality if you're lost? That's not good.
Mm.
You just go to hell as a better citizen?
Yeah,
like, that's not
cussing so
good.
much or
Okay.
something.
Now, but if you're a follower of Jesus, what is good for you is to be conformed to the image of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing in your life is not helping you be conformed in the image of Jesus. So if you think about it the way you're saying it, and you identify as this person a believer or not, that'll be very, very helpful.
It can also be. It also can be catharsis, right? Like if somebody they have a construct of like proper right or rules, and when they see somebody out of step with that, they just want to vent that to that person to feel more in the right. You know what I mean? And just so they can say, no, this is my job to point it out because it just is the way that it is. When really it might not be the right time. They might not be ready to hear it. You might not have the relationship with that person to say it.
There's a big old difference between Doug Fields taught me this in ministry. There's a big difference between having a critical eye and a critical heart. And he was talking about like doing church and as you evaluate like what's going good, ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, keep people with a critical heart as far away from the sheep as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people will try to validate themselves by pointing out everything that's wrong. A critical eye is because you love the mission and you want things to be better for the glory of God and the advancement of his kingdom. That's cool. A critical heart is cancer to a team. It is cancer to God's mission. Those are not good things.
It is cancer to a marriage.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's where I think this, yes, in regards to ministry, I think the overwhelming the overwhelming amount of people that are listening put this in the context of your marriage, right? And I'd say this is an area where I've seen my wife grow tremendously over the 17, 18 years we've been married is, she sees all the things all the time. She's very smart. She's very perceptive. She's very analytical. And when we first got married, she kind of had a category of how things could be done. There was one right way. And more times than not, her way is a better way. I mean, she's very sharp. But I'm not that way at all. I'm like, that's a way to do this, but there's probably 9 different ways, and we're going to end up in the same place, or we should. And so my brain just doesn't work singularly like that at all. And so we just had to find each other in it over time, because I would feel, and she would even tell you this, that I would feel regularly like almost judged for having a different opinion. But it was her learning how to process, how to appreciate somebody else's opinion and somebody else's process. You know what I mean? But really, where we found each other is after a few years, when you realize what, more than anything, my wife wants good for me. She doesn't just want things from me so that she feels better about herself. And so when she has begun to make that change, and I have as well, when we can really live from the place that we just want good for each other based on the process that God has each other in, that is different than we want from each other to help us live our best version of our life. You know what I mean? And if you're doing I want from you to live my best version of my life, then inherently you're going to be judgmental, because somebody's not going to live up to your standard that provides you your best life. And so that's where marriage can get super sideways. And you fall far enough down that rabbit hole where you're judging and you're judging and you're judging, you're half a step from having contempt in your heart for somebody you're married to, and that's big, big, big trouble.
Contempt is the number one predictor of divorce. Period. It's not money problems. It's the number one problem. I mean, the number one predictor. I didn't get into this tonight. It was in my brain, and I thought, I'm going to save it for later. Because if I turned it into a marriage thing, I just didn't want to do it. This is not unique to me. I've heard other people say this, but my version of it is, especially to wives, because I think there'll be a bunch of wives. I want to give a warning and then ask a question. The warning is, wives will hear this and be like, yep, I need to confront my husband to his face and say, quote,
you are out of step with the gospel.
That's it. So it's tough, man. So I would say to wives, like, a couple of things. Whatever you encourage in your husband will multiply. And whatever you criticize will metastasize. Like cancer, it'd be bad. And I heard another guy say this, that every man is either a king or a joker. And if you speak like that crown into him, then he will have a tendency to live up to taking the responsibility that a king has. But if you treat him like a clown, he's going to probably descend into acting like a clown. So that's true, and it's easy to know that from my end of it, And Gretchen does an amazing job at encouraging me in the right ways. So my question to you is, husbands, what if it's your wife that you see that's doing something or acting in a way that's out of step with the gospel? How would you? I mean, you read Ephesians 5 talks about our role is a reflection of Christ's role with the church, who washes her in the Word and gets her ready for the day of.
My wife's not capable of such, so I can't. She could never be out of step with it. So
That's a good answer.
No, I think I would answer this way. When Peter talks about, when Paul talks about the way he goes at it, he says, but when I saw that their conduct was not in step with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas before them all, if you, though a Jew, live like a Gentile and not like a Jew, how can you force the Gentiles to live like Jews? And then what's that right after the word Jews? It's a question mark.
Yep.
So it's a real good practice to start with questions, not statements.
Yep.
And I think that's true in marriage. I think that's true in brother-to-brother relationships, that questions slowly over time, assuming that they operating from the conviction or the assumption that they do want to grow and be a healthy person, that they're willing to do that, and more importantly, that they have the Holy Spirit of God inside of them who is going to teach them all things. And so I think it's like, if you go in looking for a fight, you're going to get a fight. But if you're willing to ask questions, take your time, and understand what you think you see to see if it's something you actually see, then the fruit of that thing can be much healthier. That's my personal opinion. Ask questions, take your time. On both fronts, husband to wife, wife to husband.
I don't know that I've ever done it well. That's why I'm asking probably. I know that, so like, I mean, JP's 18. He just had his last day of school today. It was crazy. And we have a great relationship. But you back this thing up 6-7 years. He's playing like Little League baseball. He wants to skip something. And I'm like, no, heck no. And Gretchen would say, you're being too hard on him. I'm like, woman, please. You don't even know what it's like to, I'm trying to turn this boy into a man. You do hard things, you know? That was always my attitude. Mm-hmm. And then there would be other times where she would say, do you think he's enjoying this? I'm like, well, you know, that kind of stuff. How's y'all's, what's it like when y'all are in the truck on the way to and from games? Just questions. Mm-hmm. That's a totally different, honestly, she's a godly woman. And she's smart enough to know me telling you just my observation, and it just doesn't go good. I mean, this is back to Genesis 3 stuff, right? But her asking, especially open-ended future kind of questions, you know, do you think his memories of this will be positive? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, you know, it's exactly what you're saying. Like as I was just thinking about it in the moment, those were the times where I'm way more open to get the log taken out of my face in those kind of areas.
I think this is a principle of leadership and also could apply to the context of marriage that we're talking about. But, and y'all know about this, like, you don't have to say everything that you notice. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it's Ephesians 4:28 is let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, only that which is helpful for the edification of the hearer. Mm-hmm. So just because something is true doesn't mean you're just supposed to say it. Mm-hmm. And edification doesn't just mean it makes them feel good. Mm-hmm. So, it's a terrible example was, okay, Vinke, you're thin. All right, if you were fat, and that was a fact, and I were to say, Vinke, you're fat, you're obese. Mm. Well, just because it's true doesn't mean I'm supposed to say it. Mm-hmm. Now, if I do love you and you're my friend and I'm concerned about your health and your future, you still don't even say it that way. You don't insult people.
Right. You
may want to ask some questions about, hey, when the Bible says love the Lord your God with all your strength, like, you think you're stewarding your life, or maybe there's some things in your life that I don't know about and I'm being all judgy, and you know, you've been diagnosed with some stuff, or you know what I mean? Like, so not only is it true, you shouldn't say things that aren't true, but you need to say things that are helpful for the edification of the hearer.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah. And you did that really well, Pastor Job. I mean, this in the context of like leadership, I'm sure you could point out all kinds of things that you just let ride and selectively touch on the things that are the most important.
Yeah, but y'all could point out a million things about me nonstop. Listen, I said it tonight. Dude, it does not take a great leader. Like, even a dog can point out all the problems. Right, yeah. Just bark, 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 bark at all the problems. Has your dog ever solved a problem? No.
And yet people think they are so unique to recognize them.
I can recognize all the problems. So what?
My dog does complete me, though.
Y'all don't even know. This guy right here has got a little fluffy ball of fur.
Her name's Piper, by the way. Oh, as in Dr. John.
Oh my gosh, so dude!
Good. What's your boy? She loves to snuggle.
And you love to snuggle that dog.
I do love that dog.
That's good.
When you hold people accountable, you mentioned this, Pastor Joby. You said it works a lot better when there's an agreement. So is that the only time you should do it?
No, God works in and through authority. So there are certain authorities as established by God, and the person in authority is responsible for people under their authority.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't care if your children give you permission to hold them accountable or not. God decided they're your children, and you will have to give them an account.
Mm-hmm.
This is crazy. Now, this one's a little bit different because you get to decide where you go to church. If you become a covenant member of the Church of 1122, a part of what you are agreeing to is being in biblical community with the pastors and elders and with other brothers and sisters. So you are agreeing to that. But again, you could decide, I don't want that. No problem. You just leave. You know, we're not going to go chase you down.
Yeah.
And we are very careful about. It was real hip for a little while to like boast at pastors' meetings about church discipline. And I'd be really, really careful with that kind of thing. We actually call it pastoral care here because we want to care for sheep. And that may require hard conversations and things, but we don't have a written code that you could be against and we could cite you for that. That's not how we go. We want to be in deep relationships. So the answer is no. There are some levels of authority that you have responsibility. So even at work, if you're the boss and people work for you, you owe it to them to have a appropriate work relationship where you are holding people accountable to whatever the values of your organization are, whether they invited you into that or not.
You didn't, I don't think you said this, but I heard you say this talking about this sermon, the phrase, if we're in Christ, your business is my business.
Yeah, that's 1 Corinthians 12. We're one body with many parts. And so Paul says, basically, like, if you stump your toe, the rest of your body's like, well, it's not my problem. I'm not the toe. Well, the whole body hurts. And so if there's any part of the body that is in jeopardy, the whole body's in jeopardy. Like, not only does the toe matter to the body, but the body matters to the toe. And so that's what's true.
Yeah. And it really does work so much better when you've given somebody permission. And I think in this case, in this text, and you pointed this out also, that it wasn't like a preference issue. It was a shepherding issue. So that's a good question to ask as well. Like, why am I pointing this out? Is it for their good? And what's at stake here?
Correct.
You know?
Right. And he rebukes them publicly because this was a public misstep. And Paul was not sinned against personally. That's what Matthew 18 is about.
Right.
Like, Paul didn't need to write a debt ledger with Peter's name on it because he wouldn't eat bacon with the Gentiles. What's that got to do with Paul? But Peter's being out of step with the gospel was negatively impacting the flock, like all the Jewish believers, even Barnabas.
Yeah.
Therefore, he publicly corrected him for the sake of Peter and the church.
Well, and they, at the time, they were each other's, at least on some level, they were each other's authority.
Correct. There was no higher earthly authority.
Higher. Peter, Paul, and James were it. I mean, there was like John was somewhere.
Right, yeah. I would say all the apostles.
Yeah, they were the plurality of leadership for the church. And so if Paul wasn't going to, I mean, James obviously wasn't going to talk to him about it. You know what I'm saying? And it's because it was to James's people that he was conforming. So if Paul wasn't going to go to his brother and be like, bro, who was going to do it? And so I do think there's something to that we're talking about peers that have taken responsibility for each other. Like, I think that's a huge part of the permission thing and my willingness to call you out or to have confrontation with you is that if I'm not willing to step in and to take responsibility with you for the process and the outcome, then I don't know how I can inject myself into your situation without being willing to take responsibility with you.
And part of what I wanted to point out too is that no man is above biblical rebuke. Even Peter, who in the Catholic tradition would have been the first pope, and current Catholic doctrine would be the Pope's opinion is on par with the Scripture in regards to authority. Not according to Galatians 2, it's not. If the Pope is out of step, according to the Bible, then he should be rebuked.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like, I know Romans gets all the press with Martin Luther, but Martin Luther was like,
He was wild about Galatians.
oh my gosh. He's like, this is it, man. This is the mantra of biblical reformation right here.
Right.
Oh, he's got this great line. I'm going to quote it, I think, next week, but I can't remember exactly. But he was like, this should be read, this should be memorized, this should be pounded into your head or something like that, talking about Galatians.
Oh. Well, you jumped over towards the end of the sermon to Matthew 7, talking about the speck in your brother's eye and the log in your own eye. And when I was listening to it, a question came to mind. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. So does that mean you should only correct others for things you've already dealt with? Or
I think it's more of like an empathy thing. Like, before you go correcting everybody and get on the morality police, first of all, quit using the Bible like a pair of binos to look at everybody else and hold up the mirror to your face first. How about humble yourself a little bit and don't think too highly of yourself and realize, man, I think Bruce Frank said it here one time, we all check the sanctification boxes in different orders. So it's all just one of three sins, probably, right? Lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life. So before I start coming at you over whatever, just take an inventory real quick. Maybe that'll help me remember the grace of God that I need so much in my life, so that I could come to you Galatians 6 style, with gentleness, to just for restoration as the point, as opposed to, instead of using the sword of the Spirit like a scalpel to do a little heart surgery, I can very quickly use it like a hammer to be right, like a gavel, like I told you. So I think that would help me avoid being all judgy when I realize, man, if we got to play the judge game, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, and you take that Matthew 7 in context of the eye is the lamp of the body, and the way that they thought about the eye, which is really similar to how we actually think about the mind. So what he's not saying is that you have a seeing problem. It's not saying you have cataracts, or he's saying you have a thinking problem, that there's something growing out of your face and it's coming from your mind. And the way you see the world, or the way you're thinking about this thing that is putting filters on everything you're experiencing, until you check that and then check it again and then check it again, submit that under grace, and that becomes in tune with the mind of Christ. Until you do that, don't worry about the speck that you're seeing in your brother's eye right now. And so that's where we can get super sideways super quick, is that I can just jump to strong conclusions about some perception I have over something that you're doing or not doing, and I don't check all my filters and all my thoughts, that I spend 0 seconds praying about it. I spend 0 seconds trying to line it up with the character of Christ, and then I just come at you like I'm going to help you, Yeah. And that's real dangerous.
So the reality is that the great white throne judgment, ain't nobody sitting in Jesus' lap saying, let me tell you think about this one. Like, he's like, get out of my seat, man. I got this.
Right.
So when you submit yourself before the judgment of God first, I'm just, hopefully grace increases quite a bit in your life.
He's at least talking about, when you say that, it makes me think of proportion. Like, it's at least saying your thing you got to deal with is a much, much bigger deal. Log versus speck, deal with that. It's much, much bigger deal for you to deal with.
We typically, maybe not always, what we typically do is I judge your actions and my intentions. That's what we do. Like, if I'm late to a meeting, I'm justified in my lateness because of whatever reason it is. But if you're late to a meeting, I'm like, how dare you? Leave earlier. But you don't. And so we often want justice for you, but grace for me. And so I think a big part of pulling the log out is like, let me be reminded of what Christ went through, so that I could get his grace. Now I need to offer that kind of grace and truth to you for your sake. Because one of the things that people miss is that there's a so that. Like, so first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly. Like, I don't want you trying to get the speck out of mine if you can't see. Because I think you're going to damage my eyes because you can't see. Or if you're not thinking about this rightly and you're just trying to beat me up and be right, I don't want you trying to help me with this issue. I want you to be at your absolute best with clarity of thought, clarity of sight, after you have reflected on the gospel in your life before you start trying to help me. And then he says, I mean, that next verse is basically like, and bro, you can't fix nobody. Like, if they don't want it, it's just throwing pearls before swine. I mean, think about this. Like, what's a pearl worth to a hog? Nothing. They just smell it. They're like, this ain't no good to me. I can't eat it. It don't smell like nothing. And just leave something very valuable because they don't think they need it.
Yeah.
So this is I mean, sometimes we can have a savior complex and think, I'm your hope. And you just keep somebody just continuously rejects some gospel infusion into their life. But at some point, you're just throwing pearls before swine. You're just taking something holy, the gospel, and laying it before a dog.
Yeah. Well, we're talking all about freedom in this series, and that's some freedom right there to have that kind of relationship and to have somebody help you through. I mean, I think about the blind spots. Like, everybody's got blind spots. We can deceive ourselves. And there's so much stuff about ourselves we can't see. So we need somebody else to do the work, to take the log out of their eye so they can help us with the speck in our eye. So, Pastor Joby, what else you got before you close this down?
I just want to say thank God for our elders at our church. Just in case folks don't know how we're organized here, we have a bunch of biblically qualified elders that we're all submitted to, but they collectively are my bosses, and there are things like annual reviews, and there's a lot of speck removing every year. I'm telling you, it is, very pointed conversations of times where I have been out of step with the gospel. And in my mind, it was like, for the sake of kingdom advancement, because hell is hot, forever's a long time. There's a lot of lost people. We got to go. And the elders would say, hey, man, you can't run over people trying to save people, And they've helped me a lot. And I got a long way to go, there's no doubt about it. But they love, in no particular order, well, they love Jesus the most, so that's the order. But they love our church, and they love me, and they love y'all. Like, they love our staff so much that they don't let this stuff go unsaid. And so, and I'll tell you, man, I welcome the correction. I've always been coached, I mean, from like, I don't know, I started playing sports at like 5 years old or something. And so I've always loved having an older, wiser person in my life to point out ways I could get better.
Yeah.
And the more you welcome that into your life, the more you'll get it.
Yeah.
And so the more you stiff arm that, eventually nobody will ever tell you how you could get better.
Yeah.
And then you'll be the best you can be, which will be terrible.
You always learn from experience. It can either be yours or somebody else's.
Yeah. And others' experience is called wisdom.
That's right.
All right, let's pray. Our good and gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you that when you saw the sin in our lives, the speck in our eye, that there was no log for you to take out of yours. So you put it on your back, and you carried it to Calvary, and you became sin for us, that for whoever would believe, we would be imputed with your perfect righteousness. And so, God, spiritually speaking, we are righteous. We have a right standing before you. But yet, there is a distance between now and the time we're glorified. And so, God, I pray for just biblical community, not just in our church, but in all churches, that we would love each other enough that we would spur one another on towards godliness. And God, I pray it would be well received for your glory. I pray it in Jesus' name.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. The end.
You nailed it.